Hi, I'm Walter D. Kennedy. I am Chief of Heritage Operations for the National Sons of Confederate Veterans. I'm here with Ron Kennedy, my twin brother, who is Deputy Chief of Heritage Promotion. And we're going to talk about the U.S. Constitution. As you may know, September is the month in which we in the United States celebrate our wonderful document, the Constitution of the United States. As a matter of fact, September the 17th is Constitution Day. So we'll be talking about that, especially as it relates to the South. As many people recognize, Southerners have often maintained that we are the defenders of the original Constitution, and our Confederate forefathers were defending the Constitution. So we'll talk about the Constitution.
I believe, didn't our Commander-in-Chief, didn't he announce?
I believe you're correct. Commander-in-Chief Gremlin did announce that September will be the month that we and the Sons of Confederate Veterans will be celebrating, studying, and learning more about the Constitution. Ron, tell me a little bit about the Constitution. Is it a revolutionary document? What's the deal with the Constitution?
Well, the wonderful thing about the U.S. Constitution and the Revolution of 1776 is that, as many of our Southern scholars have pointed out, our revolution was a conservative revolution, unlike the revolution of, say, the Reign of Terror in France during the French Revolution and the guillotine and all the horrors there, or the Bolshevik Revolution in communist Russia and all the horrible deaths
turning
there.
Society upside
just
down.
tearing, and Mao Zedong society. Our revolution was a conservative revolution where our ancestors wanted to preserve the rights of Englishmen, and their rights, as they saw it, that they had gotten as a part of their heritage from England, was being encroached upon by the central government in London.
And we had, of course, starting with the prior to 1776, we had a provisional government for the colonies. It's interesting that provisional government had a quasi-unwritten constitution. It didn't have a written constitution. The interesting thing about the provisional government was that it was said that it could suggest anything, but it could really accomplish nothing. Who had the authority to accomplish?
The authority came from the states, the sovereign states. And of course that was more recognized in the subsequent government under the Articles of Confederation, which was the first real written constitution that we had in the United States. It was a very interesting document because the Articles of Confederation, they set out specifically that we are setting up in the United States a Confederate, and they called it a Confederate, or a federal government. Not a national government, but a confederated, a league of sovereign states leagued together under the Articles of Confederation.
Yes. And the second article of the Confederation clearly states that the states were what?
Free, independent, and sovereign states. And that's Article 2 of the Articles of Confederation.
The first government, the first constitution of the United States.
Right. Now, it's important that the term states, we often associate in America today the term state with a province, like the province of Canada. We also may think of states as an appendage of the central government, like a county is to a state. But no, states in that time meant the same thing as a nation.
Like the state of Great Britain.
Exactly. As we said in a prior video that we talked about the Declaration of Independence, when the colonies were given their freedom, each state was mentioned, the state of Massachusetts, Georgia, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And then they also mentioned the state of Great Britain. So the term state meant nation, and that's what it means.
Well, the Articles of Confederation was a limited government with specific powers, but I noticed that in the Articles of Confederation, the term Perpetual Union is mentioned.
That's very unique to the Articles of Confederation. Now, I went through and read and counted, and I forget now, it was between 6 and 8 times in the Articles of Confederation where they specifically termed the government, this Confederate government or federal government, a perpetual union.
Right.
But it wasn't perpetual.
What happened to that perpetual union?
Well, under the Constitution of 1787 that was proposed and subsequently ratified, the original Constitution, the states seceded from the Articles of Confederation and acceded to the new government, the new union under the Constitution.
So in effect, the perpetual government was perpetual only as long as the members of that union desired it to be perpetual. It's like any other free association of people. It may be classified perpetual as long as everybody's happy and wants to see the thing. Well, that's interesting. And in the U.S. Constitution we have now from 1787 to today, that term perpetual union can be found where?
Nowhere. It's nowhere in the document. And the reason was that they all thought that this was a grand experiment that some of the states may withdraw from and form their own. And it's very important that the Articles of Confederation that preceded the Constitution established a limited government. Well, guess what? The Constitution that we currently have, the original Constitution, it set up a Confederate, and again, many of the Founding Fathers referred to it in both the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist.
Alexander Hamilton,
referred to it as a Confederate government or a federal government, the Union as a Confederate or a federal government. But they were created this union was created by the sovereign states with limited powers. The only major difference was that the states now had a free trade zone within, which they didn't have under the Articles of Confederation. And of course, the term perpetual union was lost. It was gone.
Okay, the U.S. Constitution, and we're saying here that it was created by sovereign states. How can you defend that? Because many people say, well, the Constitution was created by we, the people, all the people of America. So how do you answer that?
Well, you should answer it always by going back to the original document. Look at Article 7. Under Article 7, it says the ratification of the Constitution of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states so ratified. In other words, the states were to ratify.
So the people of the state would go into a convention and they would determine for themselves, unencumbered by any other action of any other group. So the people of the state are acting as a sovereign community. Or what about the states? It says 9, there were 13. What happens to that? Do they wage war on those that did not come in and force them into the Union?
No, they didn't have to go get Sherman and march through Georgia in order to get Georgia to join. The states, on their own volition, they elected either to join or not join. We had states like, it was Rhode Island and I believe North Carolina that was very, very late in joining, and the whole time they were just a sovereign nation out doing their own thing.
Treated as such. And that's great. Well, nothing could be clearer indication of states' rights in Article 7 of the Constitution, which is the last article of the main body of the Constitution, which tells us how this state will be given, how this document will be given power, and it's by the people of the states. And it's important to say the state government is not sovereign. The people of that state, they are sovereign, and their will is what is determined.
And their sovereign will is expressed by their corporate agent, the state.
Right. Well, in debating the ratification of the Constitution, we had several different groups of people. We had high Federalists like Alexander Hamilton from New York. They believed in a very strong central government that really could dominate the states. You had moderate Federalists such as Madison, James Madison of Virginia, and you had anti-Federalists such as Patrick Henry. And the anti-Federalists were really opposed to the Constitution, but it's interesting. Why was Patrick Henry opposed to adopting the Constitution?
Well, as he famously said, the first thing I have at heart is American liberty. The next is American Union. And he was concerned that the Northern majority under this new Constitution would dominate the South, exploit the South, tax the South, and really make the South a subject of the Northern majority.
Kind of a milch cow of the Union.
The milch cow of the Union, right.
Well, and Patrick Henry warned against that, but the actions of men like Patrick Henry and the moderate Federalists did produce what we later became known, what we call the Bill of Rights, which was another limitation of the central government. It did not, now, and I believe the Supreme Court actually stated this early in the history of this nation, that the Bill of Rights does not limit the states or the people. It limits who?
The federal government.
The federal government, which is very interesting. Now, a lot of people say, well, the Constitution is just a document that was created by old white European men 150, 200, 300 years ago. It cannot, it can't apply to us. But yet, we know that nothing is written in stone in the Constitution. There are ways of changing the Constitution, legal, legitimate ways.
Yeah, there's two ways that you can change the Constitution. One is the constitutional method, the other is an unconstitutional method. The constitutional method is through amendment process, where the Congress, 2/3 of both houses of Congress, submits an amendment. Then it's submitted to the states. But who has the ultimate authority? Not Congress, not President, not the Supreme Court, but we, the people within our respective states. You've got to get 3/4 of the states to agree to the amendment before it is changed.
Why is it made so difficult? 3/4 is a high standard to reach. Why was it done so?
It was done specific. It was intentionally made difficult because the states, the sovereign states, wanted to protect their reserved rights.
And it's interesting to know that the small states such as Rhode Island and even South Carolina at the time, or Georgia, North and South, they were equally fearful of large states dominating the government.
Exactly.
So it was the first minority rights effort to protect the rights of the minority.
Now, the other way of changing the Constitution is that an unconstitutional method where the majority, the ones that control the federal government, can wage war against the minority, compel them to submit to a new form of government, reject decentralized, limited federalism, and establish a system of supreme federal government.
So I suppose we would say it's no longer government by consent, but government by conquest.
Conquest and coercion.
Okay, well, listen, that's great. That's the end of our first part of our look at the Constitution, and we will be back at another video for part 2 where we'll look at the purpose of the Constitution.